I fell for Ryan at first sight. But I also knew I was just one of his many girlfriends. He thought I loved him the most. After all, I hung on his every word. "You know what, babe? You're the easiest to keep happy," he murmured. He leaned in, his lips brushing mine. "Is that so?" I smirked, gently pushing him away. "I'm getting married, Ryan." Ryan's face wasn't just unforgettable, his physical stamina was also way better than I could have ever imagined. "Babe, I have a client dinner tonight, so I'll be back late." "Don't wait up, just go to sleep," he whispered in the dark room, finding my lips with perfect accuracy. His warm palm cupped the back of my head. Between his teeth lingered the crisp scent of pine mixed with the heavy, bitter smell of tobacco. After a long, breathless moment, he finally let me go and left. Only when the heavy thud of the front door echoed through the apartment did I get out of bed and start getting dressed up. I'm a sucker for a pretty face. The moment I saw Ryan at that party, I knew I had to have him. That night, whether it was because my gaze was too intense or something else, he kept looking over at me. Even while he was busy sliding through the crowd, flirting with every girl in sight, his eyes kept locking onto mine. He was a friend of my brother, Austin. "Chloe, the guy is a total player. Think carefully. He goes through women faster than he changes his shirts," Austin had warned me. He knew my personality too well. He knew that if I wanted something, I wouldn't stop until I got it. "You know me," I said, tilting my head with a smile. "I love a challenge. Let's see if I can break his record." With Austin acting as our reluctant matchmaker, it didn't take long for Ryan and me to start dating. Early the next morning, a woman's sharp voice echoed from the hallway. "I'm giving you one last chance. Is it her, or is it me?" Curious, I opened my door. It was my new neighbor, Amber. She was gorgeous, with a killer body and an incredibly edgy style. But for some reason, every time I ran into her, a strange sense of unease would wash over me. "What are you looking at? Never seen a hot girl before?" She turned and glared at me, her tone dripping with hostility. I couldn't understand why she hated me so much. Her eyes were always filled with pure disgust. "I just wanted to see whose dog was barking so early in the morning," I said, raising an eyebrow and biting back. "What did you just say?" Furious, she raised her hand and lunged at me. I slammed the door shut in her face, letting her scream her head off in the hallway. Ding! My phone buzzed. A new friend request on Snapchat. I tapped on the profile picture. It was a handsome guy, and it looked like a real photo, not a stock image. "Hey there," a message popped up almost instantly. I was confused. Ever since I started dating Ryan, I barely used dating apps or accepted random requests. How did this guy find me? "Did you forget about me already, Chloe?" The guy sent another message when I didn't reply. I stared at the screen, racking my brain, but I couldn't place his face at all. Question mark, he sent. He was being way too pushy. I tapped his profile details. It showed he had added me by searching my exact username. "Sorry, who is this?" I typed and sent. Oddly enough, he went completely silent. Over the next few days, I bumped into Amber almost every morning. "Oh, you're up early too?" I asked, watching her yawn. I was starting to suspect she was doing this on purpose. "Ugh, if I don't work, are you going to pay my bills?" She rolled her eyes, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed, looking half asleep. I turned away, ignoring her. But from what I had observed lately, she didn't seem to have a real job. She only dressed up when she was going out to party. Ding! The elevator arrived. The moment the doors slid open, Amber suddenly stood up straight and smoothed her hair. Inside the elevator stood 3 women, each dressed in completely different styles. "Oh, hey, cousin. What are you doing here?" Amber said with a fake smile to a woman wearing gold-rimmed glasses. The woman clearly wanted nothing to do with her, her eyes filled with cold annoyance. Then, Amber pulled out her phone, pressed the voice message button, and said in a sweet, dripping voice. "Ryan, babe, guess who I just ran into in the elevator?" Maybe it was a coincidence, or maybe she did it on purpose, but since I was standing right next to her, I caught a glimpse of her screen. The profile picture of the person she was messaging was identical to Ryan's. Only the contact name was different. Some people just don't know when to give up. "Always clinging to someone else's boyfriend," Amber said, tilting her head to glare at the woman behind me with pure contempt. The atmosphere in the elevator turned suffocatingly tense. But except for her, no one said a word. Ding! The elevator doors opened on the ground floor. Amber seemed to be intentionally tailing me. I walked out of the lobby slowly, then slipped into a blind spot and doubled back. Sure enough, I saw her waiting by the elevators again. My brain spun. I hid in the shadow of the staircase. Austin, I'm taking the day off, I texted my brother. Since graduating, I had been working at our family's firm, so my hours were highly flexible. Just when I thought she was going back up, the elevator doors opened. Ryan walked out. Amber smiled warmly and wrapped her arm around his. Ryan looked slightly annoyed and pulled away, but then he quickly leaned in and kissed her on the cheek. After that, they walked out of the building, one after the other. I watched their retreating figures, completely frozen. My chest tightened, and my hands started to shake. Finally, a bitter, hollow laugh escaped my lips. Memories rushed back. No wonder Ryan had looked so uncomfortable the first time he saw Amber when she moved in. I just hadn't thought much of it back then. Asterisk, some people just don't know when to give up. Always clinging to someone else's boyfriend. Asterisk. Her words echoed in my mind. When she said that, she was looking at the woman with the gold-rimmed glasses, her so-called cousin. Could it be? Ryan was dating 3 of us at the same time? The realization felt like a heavy blow to my chest, making it hard to breathe. I walked back to the elevators, trying to reconstruct the morning. The elevator had come down from the 20th floor, stopping at the 14th and 10th floors. Finding her cousin was going to be a challenge. But that was fine. I had all the time in the world. As night fell, the streetlights outside began to flicker on. I stood by my window, checking my phone. It was 7 p.m. Hearing the faint sound of laughter from the family next door only made me more irritated. Ding! The elevator doors opened. As if fate was on my side, the woman stepping out was exactly the one I was looking for. What are you doing here? She asked, stopping in her tracks. She didn't look shocked to see me. She already knew who I was. That confirmed everything. You know me? I smiled faintly. I know you. You're Chloe Miller, she said calmly, nodding. She turned to enter her passcode, then stood aside to let me in. Come in. You must have been waiting for a long time. I didn't hesitate. The second I stepped inside, I kicked off my painful heels. Seeing this, she got some ice from the freezer, wrapped it in a towel, and handed it to me to soothe my swollen ankles. I had been standing in heels all day, and the relief was heavenly. What is your relationship with Ryan? I asked, cutting straight to the chase. What do you think? She smiled weakly. I'll tell you a secret. Ryan's nickname for you is Friday. Why? I frowned, staring at her face. Because he has a girl for every day of the workweek. Monday to Friday, she said, raising an eyebrow. A girl for. I murmured, the puzzle pieces suddenly clicking together in my head. Did he really have 5 girlfriends? My heart sped up as I looked at her, desperate for the truth. Yes. He has 4 other girlfriends, she said with a dry laugh. And you are the 5th. Even though I had braced myself, hearing the confirmation still made my stomach drop. Suddenly, all his late nights made perfect, disgusting sense. And which one are you? I asked, letting out a breathless laugh. I'm his first. Monday, she said, a hint of twisted pride in her voice. I've been with him the longest. And the girl downstairs? My temples were throbbing painfully now. Her. She's Thursday, Melanie said, her voice dripping with disdain. Honestly, I don't know why she acts so smug. There is so much she doesn't know about him. She thinks Ryan only has me and you, Melanie scoffed, leaning back on her sofa. But she's wrong. And you're just okay with this? You won't let him go even though he's sleeping around? I asked, genuinely shocked. He's the hottest guy I've ever been with, and his game in bed is unmatched. I'm not giving that up, she said, completely unabashed. I stared at her. She wasn't wrong. Ryan was drop-dead gorgeous, especially his bedroom eyes. Every time we slept together, I got completely lost in his gaze. I had once told him he belonged on a movie screen. Buzz. My phone vibrated. Hey, babe. Why aren't you home yet? Ryan's voice was as smooth and charming as ever. Buzz. My phone vibrated against my palm, its screen glowing in the dim, immaculately minimalist living room of Monday. Hey, babe. Why aren't you home yet? Ryan's voice rolled through the earpiece. Honeyed and low, carrying that familiar, practiced rasp that had once made my pulse stutter. Across from me, Melanie sat with her legs crossed, swirling an amber puddle of bourbon in an old-fashioned glass. She raised an eyebrow over the rims of her gold glasses, silently watching my face. I pressed the cold, towel-wrapped ice closer to my ankle and leaned back against her velvet cushions. Traffic near the financial district is backed up 4 miles, Ryan. Austin needed me to look over a batch of contracts before tomorrow's quarterly audit. Working so late? You know you don't have to push yourself so hard, sweetheart. He murmured, his tone dripping with soft, protective concern. I bought those imported sea salt caramels you like from that French bakery on 4th. I'm waiting. At your place. Come straight back, okay? I miss you. Sea salt caramels. I remembered him handing a box of those exact pastries to Amber 2 weeks ago, when they bumped into each other near the lobby mailboxes, claiming a client had gifted him 2 crates. I will, I said, keeping my pitch silky and light. Don't wait up if you're tired. Never too tired for Friday, he chuckled softly, the joke flying right over my head had Melanie not decoded it for me 5 minutes prior. Hurry home. The line went dead. I lowered the phone and let out a long, slow breath through my teeth. The cold air in Melanie's apartment felt sharp in my lungs, stripping away the lingering haze of attraction that had clouded my judgment for the past 4 months. He does the voice well, doesn't he? Melanie said, taking a sip from her glass. The ice clinked sharply. That gravelly, midnight timber. He used it on me when he convinced me to sign the guarantor form for his luxury lease 2 years ago. My eyes snapped to hers. You signed a lease for him? I did, she said without an ounce of shame, though her knuckles whitened around the crystal glass. He told me his family trust was tied up in offshore probate. He had the charm, the jawline, and the endurance of an Olympic athlete. I was 32, running 50-hour workweeks as a senior corporate counsel, and bored out of my mind. For 6 months, I thought I had tamed the wildest stallion in Manhattan. And then I found a receipt for a diamond tennis bracelet in his coat, she replied coldly. A bracelet I never received. When I tracked down the boutique, the sales clerk described a petite blonde with a heavy southern drawl. Amber? No, Melanie scoffed, a dark smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Amber doesn't have a drawl. Amber is Tuesday's replacement who clawed her way into Thursday. The blonde was Tuesday, Genevieve. A trust fund princess whose father owns half the shipping docks in New Jersey. I stared at her, the scale of Ryan's operation widening like an oil slick across clear water. How long have you known about the others? I've known about the system for 8 months, Melanie said, setting her glass down on the marble coffee table. At first, I wanted to skin him alive. I had the legal leverage to ruin his credit score and evict him. But then I realized something. Why get angry when you can be entertained? He pays his half of the rent on time now. He provides world-class physical therapy 3 nights a month. On Mondays. And whenever he steps out of line, I drop a subtle hint that makes him sweat through his tailored suits. You're playing with fire, I said. No, Chloe. I'm warming my hands by it, Melanie countered, leaning forward, her eyes narrowing behind her lenses. The question is, what are you going to do? You're an heiress to Miller Logistics. Your brother Austin controls the biggest venture portfolio in the tri-state area. You didn't get into this for his money, you wanted the trophy. Now that you know the trophy is made of hollow plastic, do you cry in your pillow, or do you take a sledgehammer to it? I looked down at my hands. My manicured nails were steady. The initial tremor of shock had burned away, leaving behind a cold, crystalline anger. Austin had warned me that Ryan was a player. He thought I'd get my heart broken. What Austin didn't know was that our family shared the exact same ruthless streak. When a Miller gets cheated, we don't demand a refund, we foreclose on the shop. I don't cry, I said softly, looking up into Melanie's calculating gaze. And I don't share. Melanie's smile widened into something genuinely predatory. Good. Then let's talk about Wednesday. By the time I took the elevator back down to my floor, it was nearly 8:30 p.m. I unlocked my apartment door with a smooth turn of the key. The foyer lights were dimmed to an ambient, romantic amber. Soft jazz played from the Sonos speaker in the corner, and the scent of sandalwood incense hung heavy in the air. Ryan was standing by the kitchen island, sleeves rolled up to his forearms, displaying the lean, sculpted tendons of a man who spent an hour every morning lifting weights. He turned as the door clicked, a slow, devastatingly handsome smile spreading across his face. "There's my girl," he said, stepping over and catching me by the waist. He pulled me flush against his chest. His body heat was immediate, familiar, and undeniably intoxicating. He dipped his head, nuzzling the crook of my neck, his lips brushing the sensitive skin below my ear. "You smell like rain and cold air," he murmured, his hands sliding down to the curve of my hips. "Did Austin give you a hard time?" "Just the usual numbers," I said, allowing my hands to rest on his broad shoulders. Beneath the soft cashmere of his sweater, his muscles were tense, poised like a panther waiting to strike. "He thinks we're over-leveraged in our logistics acquisition." "Austin is too cautious," Ryan murmured, trailing light kisses along my jawline, until his mouth hovered millimeters from mine. "A man has to know when to take risks. When to go all in. Is that your investment philosophy?" I asked, tilting my chin slightly, meeting his dark, hooded eyes. "It's my life philosophy," he whispered, and then he kissed me. He kissed like he owned the air in my lungs. It was deep, rhythmic, demanding, and expertly calibrated to make a woman lose her train of thought. If I hadn't spent the last hour reviewing his weekly schedule with Melanie, I would have surrendered to it just like I had for the last 4 months. Instead, I kept my eyes wide open in the dark. I watched the subtle flutter of his eyelashes, the slight furrow between his brows as he concentrated on performing perfection. He wasn't kissing me, he was executing a routine. A Friday routine. I let him pull me toward the bedroom, playing along with every touch, every breath. But when he reached for the hem of my silk blouse, I gently placed my palms flat against his chest and pushed him back onto the mattress. "Not tonight, Ryan," I said with a soft, teasing pout. He blinked, a flicker of genuine surprise cracking his smooth facade. "What? Why? I waited 3 hours for you." "My ankle," I lied smoothly, pointing down at the faint swelling around my right foot. I twisted it on the curb coming out of the office. "It's throbbing. If you really want to take care of me, you can go into the freezer, make me an ice pack, and pour me some wine." A flash of mild irritation rippled across his jaw, gone before an untrained eye could catch it. He instantly smoothed his expression into one of gentle, selfless devotion. "Of course, sweetheart. Why didn't you say so earlier?" He kissed my forehead, swinging his legs off the bed. "Lie down. I'll take care of everything." As soon as he stepped out into the hallway, I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. The Snapchat app had another notification badge. I opened the thread. The profile, the striking, dark-haired man with piercing gray eyes, had sent another message while I was in the elevator. "User, did you really forget our bet from Saint-Tropez, Chloe? Or are you just pretending you don't recognize the Carlisle crest?" The Carlisle crest. My breath caught in my throat. Julian Carlisle. Julian was the elusive heir to the Carlisle Maritime Empire, Austin's biggest collegiate rival and the very man our family firm had been trying to lock into an exclusive logistics partnership for the last 6 months. 2 summers ago, at a yacht party off the coast of Saint-Tropez, I had beaten him in a high-stakes poker game, taking his vintage Patek Philippe as a trophy before disappearing into the Mediterranean night without leaving my number. How had he tracked down my private Snapchat? Before I could type a reply, another message appeared. "Julian, word on the street is that your little boyfriend, Ryan Vance, is pitching my board and equity stake in his Shell import company tomorrow afternoon. He used your brother's name as a reference. Julian, are you going to let him drag the Miller name into the mud, or are you going to buy me a drink and tell me how you want his head delivered?" I stared at the glowing screen, a cold shiver of exhilaration shooting straight down my spine. Ryan wasn't just a player. He was a parasite. He was using Austin's reputation, Melanie's legal guarantees, and my family's clout to pitch a fraudulent venture to the single most dangerous private equity mogul on the East Coast. Footsteps approached the bedroom. I quickly cleared the notification, locked the screen, and slipped the phone under my pillow just as Ryan walked in carrying a glass of Pinot Noir and a towel-wrapped ice pack. "Here you go, babe," he said, kneeling beside the bed with a solicitous smile. "Let me hold it against your foot." I looked down at his handsome, chiseled face, the face that had seduced 5 different women into funding his lifestyle, and I smiled back, sweet as poison. "Thank you, Ryan," I murmured, running my fingers through his thick, styled hair. "You're so good to me." Really, you're one of a kind. The next morning, Ryan left at 6:45 a.m., citing an urgent breakfast meeting with the supply chain consultants. I watched through the living room peephole as he adjusted his Italian silk tie, checked his reflection in the elevator mirror, and pressed the button for the 10th floor before heading down to the garage. 10th floor. That was Wednesday's floor. According to Melanie, Wednesday was Clara Higgins, a 27-year-old certified pediatric nurse who worked the graveyard shift at Mount Sinai. Ryan usually stopped by on Wednesday evenings, but whenever he needed extra cash or an early morning homemade breakfast to fuel his gym routine, he paid Clara a sunrise visit, telling her he had just finished a grueling overseas conference call. I walked back to my closet, picked out a tailored, emerald green power suit from Alexander McQueen, slipped into 4-inch Louboutin pumps, and grabbed my designer tote. My phone rang. It was Austin. "Chloe, where are you?" Austin's voice was unusually tense. "Are you coming into the office today?" "I'm on my way down to the garage now." "What happened?" "Julian Carlisle's assistant called my office 20 minutes ago," Austin said, his tone a mix of suspicion and sheer disbelief. "Julian wants an impromptu summit at 11 a.m. at the Manhattan Yacht Club. He specifically requested that you attend the meeting as our chief negotiator." "What the hell did you do, Chloe? Did you see him behind my back?" "I haven't seen Julian Carlisle since the south of France, Austin," I replied, coolly, stepping out into the hallway and locking my door. "But don't worry. I'll make sure the Miller family comes out on top." "And what about Ryan?" Austin asked, hesitating. "Ryan called me yesterday, asking for an introduction to Carlisle's acquisitions team. I told him Carlisle doesn't deal with small-time intermediaries, but Ryan insisted he had an in. Did you give him company data?" "Of course not," I said, my voice hardening. "Austin, listen to me carefully. Whatever Ryan asks you for today, give him nothing. If he asks for an endorsement, tell him you're reviewing his prospectus. Don't sign a single piece of paper." Austin went quiet for a beat. "Did he do something to you?" "Not yet," I murmured, watching the elevator numbers count down. "He's about to find out what happens when you mistake a predator for a pet." The Manhattan Yacht Club was wrapped in floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the gray, choppy waters of the East River. The private dining room on the 3rd floor was reserved. When the maitre d' ushered me in, only one man was sitting at the long mahogany table, nursing an espresso while flipping through a leather-bound dossier. Julian Carlisle looked even sharper in person than he did on a private yacht in Saint-Tropez. He had the kind of aristocratic, sharp-angled jawline that looked like it had been carved from marble by someone who despised softness. His dark hair was meticulously combed, his steel-gray eyes possessed an intimidating, predatory clarity, and his bespoke charcoal 3-piece suit screamed old money and absolute authority. As the door clicked shut, he closed the folder and looked up. "You're 5 minutes early," Julian said, his voice deep, cultured, and laced with an amused edge. "I see you're still punctual, Miss Miller. I see you're still keeping tabs on women who took your watch, Mr. Carlisle," I retorted, pulling out the heavy leather chair directly across from him and sitting down without waiting for an invitation. A faint smirk touched his lips. He reached into his vest pocket, pulled out the vintage Patek Philippe I had won from him 2 years ago, and placed it gently on the polished wood between us. "You left it in the casino's safety deposit box under the name, Friday," Julian said, leaning back and resting his chin on his steepled fingers. "Did you think I wouldn't connect the dots when a third-rate broker named Ryan Vance came to my office last week, bragging that his girlfriend, Friday, the heiress to Miller Logistics, was ready to co-sign an 8-figure shipping venture?" My fingers curled slightly against the edge of the table. Ryan had the nerve to use my moniker in a business pitch. He didn't just use it. He used it as collateral, Julian said, his gaze drilling into mine with piercing intensity. "He claimed that you were so hopelessly infatuated with him that you'd sign over your voting shares in the Brooklyn terminal expansion to secure his funding." A cold laugh burst from my throat. "The man is delusional. He's a narcissist with $24 million in unhedged short positions," Julian corrected coldly, opening the dossier and sliding a financial audit across the table. "Look at the numbers, Chloe." I pulled the document closer. As I scanned the columns, my jaw tightened. Ryan had set up 3 separate shell corporations in Delaware. Over the last 18 months, he had siphoned $450,000 from Melanie via unauthorized loan guarantees using forged signatures on her legal letterhead. $1.2 million from Genevieve, Tuesday, convincing her father's trust fund manager that he was investing in eco-friendly maritime freight. $180,000 from Clara, Wednesday, taking her life savings under the pretense of buying a brownstone in Park Slope for their future wedding. $320,000 from Amber, Thursday, who had maxed out 4 high-interest credit lines to fund his luxury sports car leases after he promised to launch her modeling agency. And now, he was aiming for the jackpot, $15 million from the Miller family to cover his catastrophic losses in high-risk derivatives before the SEC stepped in. He's running a 5-woman Ponzi scheme, I whispered, the sheer audacity of it turning my stomach. He's running a train straight off a cliff, Julian said, leaning forward until his shadow crossed over the table. And the moment it crashes, he plans to skip town to Dubai on a one-way private charter, leaving you, your brother, and those 4 other women to face the creditors and the federal prosecutors. I looked up from the papers, my eyes locking with Julian's steel-gray gaze. When does his charter leave? Sunday night, Julian replied. Which means you have 4 days to decide whether you want to call the police and let the tabloids drag the Miller name through the gutter for months, or let me help you destroy him quietly, completely, and with maximum entertainment value. I leaned back in the chair, crossing my legs, feeling the cold, exquisite thrill of a counter-trap falling into place. Why are you helping me, Julian? I asked, raising an eyebrow. The Carlyle family doesn't do charity work. Julian's eyes darkened, a flicker of genuine heat breaking through his icy composure. He reached across the table, picked up the vintage watch, and held it out toward me. I don't do charity, Julian murmured, his voice dropping an octave. I do acquisitions. You beat me once, Chloe. I don't like losing to someone who lets herself be played by an amateur. Help me bury him, and when the dust settles, you and I are going to sit down and talk about a real partnership. I looked at the watch in his hand, then up into his steady, unblinking eyes. Deal, I said. By Wednesday evening, the coalition was formed. Melanie's living room became command central. Sitting on the large sectional sofa were 3 women who had never breathed the same air without wanting to scratch each other's eyes out. Melanie in her crisp silk blouse and gold spectacles, holding a tablet, Amber, wearing smeared eyeliner and a distressed denim jacket, trembling with rage, and Clara, the pediatric nurse, still in her seafoam scrubs, clutching a lukewarm cup of chamomile tea with tear-stained cheeks. I gave him my mother's inheritance, Clara sobbed quietly, staring at the floor. He told me we were going to get married in June. He showed me blueprints of the house in Brooklyn. He's a lying, parasitic piece of garbage. Amber screamed, slamming her fist against the armrest. He told me he hated both of you. He told me Chloe was an ice queen he only slept with because her brother had corporate tickets to the U.S. Open. He swore he was going to buy me that penthouse in Tribeca once his tech startup went public. Shut up, Amber, Melanie said sharply, without looking up from her screen. Your screeching isn't recovering your $300,000. Look at the ledger. Melanie turned the tablet toward the room. Chloe and Julian Carlyle have already frozen his secondary accounts in the Cayman Islands through a temporary injunction, Melanie explained, her tone as clinical as a surgeon's scalpel. The only liquid capital Ryan has access to right now is the $500,000 he's carrying in bearer bonds in his penthouse safe, plus the $3 million he expects Austin Miller to wire him tomorrow morning at his investor gala. He's hosting a gala? Clara sniffled, wiping her eyes. Not a gala, I said, stepping into the room from the balcony with my phone in hand. A retirement party for his freedom. All 3 women looked at me. Ryan thinks he has played us all into our designated corners, I continued, pacing slowly in front of them. He thinks Monday is docile because she's getting physical satisfaction. He thinks Tuesday is secured by false promises to her father. He thinks Wednesday is waiting at home with a hot meal. He thinks Thursday is too stupid to see past his cheap jewelry. And he thinks Friday, I paused, a razor-sharp smirk touching my lips, is the easiest to keep happy. So what's the play? Amber asked, her hostility toward me completely replaced by a desperate, vindictive hunger. How do we tear him apart? I leaned down, placing both hands on the glass table. Tomorrow night is his 30th birthday, I said. He told each of you he was celebrating with a private family dinner at different times of the weekend. But tomorrow night, he invited Austin, myself, and Julian Carlyle to a private banquet room at the Pierre to celebrate his supposed business breakthrough. He didn't invite us, Clara whispered. No, I replied, my eyes gleaming with cold malice. You're going to be his surprise guests. All 5 of us. Thursday passed in a blur of synchronized maneuvers. Julian's legal team worked with Melanie to draft the criminal indictment and freeze the remainder of Ryan's offshore assets. Meanwhile, Austin, who had turned pale with fury after I showed him the Delaware Shell Company documents, played his part to perfection. He called Ryan and promised that the Miller Family Foundation would deliver a certified cashier's check for $3.5 million at the Pierre dinner to seal their joint venture. Ryan was so ecstatic he could barely breathe. When he came to my apartment on Thursday afternoon to drop off his tuxedo, he practically bounced on his heels. Babe, tonight is going to change our lives, he said, catching me in the kitchen and pulling me into his arms. His cologne, heavy pine and expensive citrus, washed over me. Once this deal with Austin clears, I'm taking you to the Maldives for 2 weeks. Just you and me. No phones. No business. Really? I purred, adjusting his black silk bow tie with deliberate care. Just the 2 of us? Just you and me, he swore, pressing a passionate kiss to my lips. You know what, babe? You're the easiest to keep happy. I smiled into his neck, the cold metal of the prologue's memory clicking into real-time reality. Is that so? I smirked, gently pushing his hands away from my waist. I'm getting married, Ryan. Ryan froze. The smug, confident smile on his face faltered for the fraction of a second before he let out a nervous, confused chuckle. What did you say? I said, I'm getting dressed, I lied effortlessly, smoothing my emerald silk gown with a playful wink. You heard me wrong. Go on, get to the venue early to greet the guests. Austin and I will arrive right at 8. Ryan let out a relieved breath, rubbing his temples with a self-deprecating shake of his head. Jesus, Chloe. For a second there, I thought you lost your mind. Never sharper, darling, I said. Now go. He kissed my cheek, grabbed his garment bag, and practically floated out the door. 8:15 p.m. The Pierre Hotel, Grand Salon B. The private dining hall was bathed in warm chandelier light. Crystal champagne. Flutes gleamed atop crisp white tablecloths. A jazz trio played soft Gershwin in the corner. Ryan Vance stood at the center of the room like a king holding court. He wore a midnight blue Tom Ford tuxedo, holding a glass of Dom Perignon, chatting up 2 junior associates from Austin's logistics team whom he had invited to pad the room. The heavy double doors swung open. Ryan turned, ready to flash his $1 million smile at Austin and me. Instead, the room went dead silent. Walking through the doors first was Genevieve, Tuesday, draped in a stunning crimson backless gown, flanked by 2 private security guards. Ryan's smile twitched. Jen? What are you doing here? I told you. My family dinner was on. Before he could finish, the doors opened wider. Melanie walked in, her gold-rimmed glasses gleaming under the chandeliers, carrying a thick leather folder. Right behind her came Amber, wearing a glittering silver mini-dress, her arms crossed and her glare sharp enough to draw blood. And behind Amber walked Clara, dressed in an elegant black cocktail dress, her chin held high despite the pale tension in her cheeks. Monday. Tuesday. Wednesday. Thursday. Ryan's face drained of every drop of color. His hand trembled, the champagne in his flute sloshing against the rim. What is this? Ryan stammered, backing up until his spine hit the edge of the mahogany head table. Is this a joke? Melanie, what the hell did you do? I didn't do anything, Ryan, Melanie said with a crisp, polite smile as she took a seat at the main table. I just brought your weekly planner. You lying bastard. Amber lunged forward, but Melanie caught her wrist with a calm, warning grip. Patience, Amber, Melanie murmured. The main course hasn't arrived yet. The double doors parted one final time. I walked into the room, wearing a striking, off-the-shoulder emerald gown that fell to the floor like liquid jade. On my left arm was my brother, Austin, his expression dark as a thundercloud. And on my right arm, commanding every eye in the room with effortless, suffocating authority, was Julian Carlyle. Ryan looked like he had been struck by lightning. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His eyes darted frantically between the four women seated at the table, Austin's clenched fists, and Julian's cold, mocking gaze. Chloe. Ryan choked out, stumbling toward me, his hands raised in a desperate appeal. Chloe, babe, listen to me. I don't know what they told you, but this is a setup. Amber is crazy, she's been stalking me, and Melanie is just a bitter ex-landlord, I swear to God. Save your breath, Ryan, I said, my voice cutting through the room with crystal clarity. Julian stepped forward, casually unbuttoning his tuxedo jacket and resting one hand in his pocket. He signaled toward the corner. Two men in dark suits stepped out from behind the velvet curtains, followed by an officer in federal law enforcement uniform. Ryan Vance, Julian said, his deep voice echoing off the high ceilings. As of 7:30 this evening, the New York State Attorney General's office and the SEC have executed a freeze on your secondary accounts in Delaware and Zurich. Forgery, grand larceny, wire fraud, and investment solicitation under false pretenses. Ryan's knees buckled. He grabbed the back of a chair to keep from collapsing. No, Austin, please. We're partners. Ryan pleaded, looking at my brother. You promised the $3 million. We have a deal. Austin stepped forward, looking down at his former friend with unmitigated disgust. The only thing you're getting from the Miller family, Ryan, is a front row seat to your own bankruptcy hearing, Austin said coldly. You used my sister. You used my company's name. You're lucky Julian's lawyers got to you before I did. Ryan turned to me, his chest heaving, his immaculate hair coming undone as sweat broke out along his forehead. Chloe. Friday, please, he whispered, his voice cracking. You loved me. You said I was unforgettable. You said you couldn't resist me. I walked up to him, stopping mere inches away. I looked at the face that had once dazzled me in the dim light of a crowded nightclub. Without the illusion of his charm, without the manufactured mystery. He looked small, pathetic, and utterly hollow. I reached up, gently straightened his crooked bow tie, and leaned in close to his ear, letting my perfume drift past him one last time. You're right, Ryan, I whispered softly, echoing the words from the very beginning. Your face was unforgettable. But your game was completely amateur. I pulled back, looked into his wide, terrified eyes, and smiled with radiant, unbothered grace. I'm getting married, Ryan. Just not to you. The federal agent stepped forward, producing a pair of steel handcuffs. Click. Click. As the officers hauled a screaming, incoherent Ryan Vance out of the grand salon, the remaining women at the table let out a collective, breathless exhale. Amber let out a wild, victorious laugh that echoed through the ballroom. Clara wiped away a single, final tear and smiled for the first time in weeks. Melanie picked up her champagne flute, raised it toward me across the room, and drank deeply. Genevieve walked over, squeezed my arm with genuine gratitude, and whispered, Thank you, Friday. The name is Chloe, I said with a wink. An hour later, the salon was empty. The hotel terrace was cool and quiet, overlooking the glittering canopy of Central Park bathed in moonlight. The city light stretched out endlessly below us like a sea of diamonds. I leaned against the stone balustrade, holding a glass of vintage champagne, letting the midnight breeze whip through my hair. Footsteps clicked softly behind me. Julian stepped onto the terrace, two glasses in his hands, though he set one down when he saw I was already covered. He stood beside me, leaning his tall frame against the railing, gazing out over the skyline. The asset recovery team estimates we'll recoup 85% of the funds for those 4 women by Tuesday, Julian said, his tone smooth and conversational. Your brother is already rewriting the logistics contracts. Good, I murmured, taking a sip of the cold champagne. They deserve their lives back. And what about you, Miss Miller? Julian turned his head, his steel-gray eyes capturing mine under the moonlight. Did Friday get what she wanted? I turned to face him, the hem of my emerald gown rustling softly against the marble floor. Friday is retired, I said, tilting my head with a slow, confident smile. From now on, I only operate on my own schedule. Julian's lips curved into that rare, devastating smirk that made my pulse do. Something entirely new, something genuine, sharp, and undeniably dangerous. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the vintage Patek Philippe, and gently fastened the leather strap around my left wrist, his fingers lingering against my pulse point. Then consider this an open invitation to my calendar, Julian whispered, his gaze intense, intoxicating, and completely unyielding. Whenever you're ready to play the next game. I looked down at the ticking watch, then up into the eyes of a man who was finally, truly, my equal. Don't make promises you can't afford, Carlyle, I said, raising my champagne glass. Try me, Chloe, he replied, clinking his glass against mine. I never lose. Twice.